Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 12, Episode 133, Emergency Edition of the Terrible Podcast. I am Alex Kozora. He is Dave Bryan, and Omar Khan is the Pittsburgh Steelers' new GM. So that's the reason for this late Tuesday night episode. You guys probably hearing this either super late Tuesday night or early Wednesday morning, et cetera, with the breaking news here. The Steelers have found their new GM and also an assistant GM in Andy Weidl coming over from the Eagles. Those are based off of many reports on Twitter, nothing official by the team, but that'll probably be confirmed within the next 24 hours or so now that the news is out there. So, Dave, it's been decided. This long process started since, February. It's finally come to a conclusion.
Yeah, they got Omar Khan gets the rose. How about that? And I would say that we were blown away, shocked this afternoon when it happened. But it doesn't matter after the fact now. But for those of you listening, Alex kind of had a source on this, but not enough to run on it. So Alex and I have kind of known for the last 3.5, 4 hours maybe. That it was probably trending towards this way with Omar Khan. And then, of course, the news broke later on this evening.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, no one will know for sure. Obviously, I never said it beforehand. I didn't feel like I was 100% confident to run with it, but did hear a little bit ago. So as soon as I heard some of the initial reporting that the Steelers were leaning towards Khan being the guy, you knew automatically that that report was probably true, and all the reports from Schefter and Dulac, et cetera, have confirmed that. So let's talk about the actual hire here. Again, Omar Khan to be named the Steelers' next GM, replacing Kevin Colbert. Andy Weidl to be named as the assistant general manager. Khan been with the team since 2001, known as the quote-unquote cap guy. Weidl's been the vice president of player personnel with Philadelphia. He's taken more of the Colbert path, being a Pittsburgh native. Actually, his first NFL job was with Pittsburgh as an intern in 98 and 99. Was with the team for a week when Colbert got hired and his internship ended. Since then, he's done the scouting trail, been with Baltimore, so great organization there, very well run. Also with the Eagles, and now he is with Pittsburgh as the assistant GM and Omar Khan's right-hand man.
Yeah, look, you dig a little bit even further back here. From 2000 to 2002, Andy Weidl was the National Combine Scout with the New Orleans Saints. And then from 2003 to 2004, he was a Northeast area scout with the Saints as well, too. And I believe Omar Khan was 1997 to 2001, I think, with the Saints there, kind of as a scout financial. What was his official title there? With them, he was his last job. His last really kind of quote unquote job was salary cap issues and contracts with the Saints, and I even found a blurb kind of going further back in the old newspapers in the transaction section there from 2000 when Omar Khan was named football operations / coaching assistant with the Saints way back in 2000. So long story short, Weidl and Omar Khan, they're not strangers here. So that's another good link when it comes to wondering how these guys are potentially going to work together. I think a lot of people are wondering, okay, so what does this probably mean moving forward? I kind of got a few thoughts on that. I bet you've got a couple working in your head as well, Alex, here. So kind of what does assuming this is becomes official in the next couple of days here, what do you think this means overall? What does this dynamic look like maybe going forward with the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Sure, it's a great question, and I didn't realize until you tweeted it and I saw it that Weidl and Khan worked together in New Orleans. I knew Khan was there. I didn't realize or didn't connect that Weidl was there as well at the same time. And so I think that's really important because the most interesting dynamic is going to be how does the insider Khan work with the outsider in Andy Weidl, that relationship between, actual GM and assistant GM is going to be a critical one. Also, the relationship with, of course, Mike Tomlin as well. So I think on the surface, the way most people will interpret this, because Khan is not the quote unquote football guy and Weidl is more of that conventional, scouting ranks, that those are kind of be the hats that they wear. Khan is the overseer, kind of the CEO of it, and Weidl a little bit stronger on the evaluation side. Again, Khan more of the business sense of it all, the numbers, the financial aspect, etc. But I also don't want to completely shortchange Khan either, because and I've done some digging the last couple of days on him. I knew about this a little bit before as well. At Tulane, when he first started, breaking in the football world, and even with the Saints a bit, he was working as a coaching assistant. His natural background is not necessarily the cap side of it. He just wanted to get into football however he could get into football. And with the Saints and with Tulane, he was working as more of a quality control coach, assistant, game planning, scouting, advanced kind of stuff like that. So there is that background to some degree there, granted, 20 years ago. But of course, he's been with Pittsburgh for so long. He knows how this scouting system works and the process works as well. So I don't want to say that there's no evaluation trait to him or ability to Omar Khan, because I'm sure that there is, but certainly that's going to be Weidl's strength and probably the catalyst for why he got hired.
One of the narratives that seems to have followed around Omar Khan forever and a day now is he's not a football guy, but you go back that far and he actually is, and obviously been around the Steelers for as long as he has and all like that. And whatever shortcomings that you may think or the Steelers may think that Omar Khan maybe has in the scouting end of it, you got a guy in Andy Weidl that's got damn near 25 years of experience. Obviously started, I think, with like a scouting assistant with the Steelers, as you mentioned, way back in, what was that, 99?
98, 99 was his internship.
98, 99, right in there. And then obviously in comes, his contract ends, Colbert comes in, then off he goes throughout, paying his dues throughout the business as well, too. So Weidl's a guy that's cut his teeth all over the place. The Baltimore Ravens has been one of those places, obviously, while Ozzie was there and in full term with them as their general manager. So he's been around, and obviously I think Weidl too. When you look at in that time that he was in Pittsburgh, obviously the great Bill Nunn was still alive at the time. With the Steelers as well too. So this guy has been all over the place and really cut his teeth in the scouting department. And so any kind of shortcomings, that the Steelers might feel that Omar Khan has maybe on the scouting end of it, they get it made up in spades, if you will, with a guy like Andy Weidl. So and Pittsburgh native, he understands the culture there. It sounds like I think there was a report from one of the Eagles beat writers saying that Weidl had thought that his interview went pretty well, and that Weidl and Mike Tomlin even spent a lot of time together recently, I guess, during the second round of interviews as well too. And look, it's going to be very important that the three of these guys work together, quite well, obviously, because this might be, not a full Trinity overall, but a Trinity-like kind of, I guess, staff, if you will, at the top here. You have to think at this point, Mike Tomlin's got a few of his ideas here, moving forward in this. Now, obviously, Mike Tomlin's busy coaching this football team, during the season on, really doesn't get involved with the process until right around Senior Bowl time, and then moving forward there. Now, as far as roster decisions and stuff like that might go, and building the 53, I don't know. Mike Tomlin might have a little bit more say in that. I don't know, but and obviously a guy in Weidl, as we mentioned, there got a lot of the scouting experience. It'd be interesting to see if they bring in maybe another cap guy to start grooming.
Right.
To maybe kind of help Omar Khan out. But, obviously Omar's done that so long at this point, he could probably do it in his sleep at this, at this juncture here. But, look, I don't think here's the positive, I think, at least when it comes to maybe some things that we look at from the outside, you and I haven't followed the pre-draft process for so long. I don't think a lot of it's going to change. overall. The process, I think a lot of the things that this team does during the pre-draft process, the pro day tours, instead of Kevin Colbert needing to be at all the pro days, I think just now that becomes Omar Khan needing to be at all the pro days. I would like to hope that maybe, a little bit more emphasis maybe on some analytics, maybe moving forward in this thing. But
Right.
I just think the general dynamic, the things that you and I are used to in the pre-draft process, at least the portion that we keep up with, I don't think you're going to see a lot of change in that overall.
Frankly, it's hard for me to say just because you do have an outsider in Andy Weidl coming in, and certainly Khan, I'm sure, has a different background and just different, different ideas overall. I do think probably you're going to see analytics become a more focal point of how this team works and evaluates, and probably see maybe an addition there or two of some, more experienced analytical guys in the pretty green department they have. Now they have one, maybe two guys there, but they're pretty new to the scene overall. And so Khan being the numbers guy, the business mind, I could certainly see the team work in that direction. To go back to a point you made a moment ago about Andy Weidl and Tomlin talking during the second interview, that's no surprise because I know Tomlin really wasn't part of the initial interviews, the 16, first round of candidates and things like that, but he was sitting in on all of the interviews for the second round, the 6 guys who got interviewed on the callback. So that doesn't surprise me in the least. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this thing works. I think for, just looking at what the GM, what that role looks like, who that guy needs to be, of course, a really smart guy. And I think Omar Khan is a really brilliant guy who's been viewed as almost the CEO for teams or future team president or something like that. So you just want a really, good dude and a smart guy overall. I think Khan is both of those things. You want someone who can work well with others and manage people and problem solve and things like that. I think Khan will handle that. So while he doesn't come from the traditional, scouting side of it all, I don't think that has to be an absolute must, especially when you have, an Andy Weidl and of course Mike Tomlin, who's going to be able to evaluate and be part of that process as well. So, overall, I think internal was the right way to go in terms of the actual GM, especially after an offseason where you just had big changes and of course finding your quarterback of the future. Khan was part of that process every step of the way. That's important. So overall, I think it's I didn't have a guy that I really wanted more than anybody else, but I didn't know if it was going to be Khan or not. I thought it might be Brandon Hunt, but obviously it's Khan.
Yeah, and speaking of Brandon Hunt, now you have to wonder, and been kind of wondering this for the last kind of couple weeks, I think, anyway. Here, especially as the kind of the whispers about why Weidl maybe potentially being that guy got a little bit stronger there. At this point, you have to wonder, does this spell the end of Brandon Hunt in Pittsburgh?
It's very hard for me to think that he's going to stay with his team maybe this year, but beyond that, it's really, really tough. The Bills assistant GM job, which he interviewed for, is still vacant. Maybe he goes to Philadelphia, considering a spot's open up now with Andy Weidl coming to Pittsburgh. I suggested a Hunt Weidl swap a couple weeks ago. I think that would make sense as well. The Eagles have pursued him multiple times over the last 5-7 years. And so given the fact that Hunt was not named GM, not even assistant GM, no promotion at all, it's hard for me to see why Hunt would want to stay in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be interesting to watch maybe that dynamic moving forward as well, too, here. Here's something else to consider. The Eagles recently fired Director of Scouting Operations, Casey Weidl, brother of Andy Weidl. So might we have yet another set of brothers?
True. Yeah, the Watt brothers. Brothers.
With the Steelers now. I think there's a distinct positive. One of the things that we talked about just recently as well too, and you wrote an article about as well too, is what's going to happen down even farther here. What potential changes could we see here? Obviously, probably not all the contracts are up in the scouting department. Quite honestly, some of those guys probably need to go, whose contracts might be up. But I think for the most part, you're not going to see as big a turnover maybe in down below as maybe had there been more of an outsider taking over at GM there.
Sure. I think the internal hire lessens the chances of big sweeping changes. Now, Andy Weidl may want to have one or two guys come in, and Casey Weidl makes as much sense as anybody. Another name to watch for, former Chicago Bears scout, I believe he was last their college scouting director, Mark Sadowski. He's good friends with Khan. Khan did an interview for the Bears job, I believe, earlier this year, and they were, I think, started knowing each other back at Tulane in the '90s. And so I would watch out for Mark Sadowski, especially if Brandon Hunt leaves. I could see a guy like Sadowski replacing Brandon Hunt.
And Sadowski just recently just did not have his contract renewed, right? Is that how that worked?
Yeah, he was let go in the Ryan Pace new GM hire and cycle, and he and several other scouts were let go.
All right, so that would make sense as a link to Khan. Obviously, the Casey Weidl link would make a lot of sense as well too. There, should everything stay the same down below? I don't think so. I think now's the perfect time to, and this stuff usually or could have happened anyway with some of these contracts probably ending, but it'll be interesting to see down below maybe some of these names. What's going to happen with a guy like Rick Verpreece. We don't even know what the status of his contract is, and kind of the further down you go. One thing I would kind of like to see that we don't see the Steelers really do a whole heck of a lot of, especially during the pro day circuit. You'd like to see them have a little bit more visibility out west, right?
You would. It's something they don't do that often. Rarely do you see positional coaches go out west. So aside from their area scouts, which is Mark Bruner, who lives in Washington, and you've seen Chidi Iwoma, now that he's an area scout, no longer the Blesto scout, you've seen him out west a bit. And occasionally at Dennis McInnes, he's an Oregon alum, so he's got some West Coast ties. Maybe, Bruce McNorton, occasionally someone like that. But yeah, again, there's going to be some changes there in terms of the scouting staff. What changes occur? It's hard to say. I mean, I think you're going to see something, as you mentioned. Could Rick Caprice even retire? He's been in football for a long time. Mike Butler, I could potentially see that as well. Even a Dan Colbert, what happens to him now that Kevin is still there in advisory sense? At least we assume he'll be there in some sort of advisory sense, probably a la Ozzie Newsome. But could he go somewhere else? I wrote. I mentioned this a couple weeks ago that Doug Whaley, last year actually, before he was involved in the Steelers interview process, talked about how a lot of teams don't even approach Steelers scouts. A lot of those scouts would be willing to go, if just no one ever talks to them because they just assume that they're going to stay in Pittsburgh. They're happy there. They're stable there. So now that there's a new GM, I wonder if other teams will come calling saying, hey, maybe these guys want to move now that Colbert's finally done. So we'll see what happens. I don't think you're going to see the sweeping changes, but I can't guarantee or predict that. Obviously, we'll see. And I do think they'll add, Casey Weidl, Mark Sadowski, and probably, another cap guy. I think that Khan would be smart to hire a cap guy because he knows who the good cap guys are and are not. And I think you don't want to have that extra burden. You want to be able to have another person to talk to and handle some of the nitty gritty stuff. So I think you're going to see that as well.
Yeah. And look, they have brought in other cap assistants over the years. They never lasted, right?
Well, that was Samir, right? I was remembering that correctly. Right. That was Samir Suleiman, who was probably supposed to be the heir to Khan's position, and then David Tepper buys the Panthers and hires him, and that guy's moved up the ladder as well. So yeah, there is no in-house guy. There's Cole Marcoux. He's more of the CBA type thing. I don't know how good he is in terms of the actual capology of it. That's one thing to think about, but they may want to go with somebody more experienced. Marco's pretty new.
Yeah, and I'm not throwing my hat in for
no.
no.
I'm gonna hear about you getting interviewed.
No. Here's the other thing. Philosophy. Now with this team, and regardless of who the hire was and how this ended up working out, we didn't think there was going to be a sweeping change in philosophy, overall philosophy with this organization. Meaning, build through the draft. Supplement moderately through free agency, and I just can't see that changing. Maybe they get a little bit more aggressive in free agency. If there's one area they could really probably afford to do that in, it would be that, especially right now, because you don't have the sins of the franchise quarterback hanging over you for at least the next couple of years, right? So you could maybe be a little bit more aggressive in free agency, even still, I still don't think some of these parameters that I look at that people say, Dave, you're crazy, but I end up being right about is some of that, the salary hierarchy and bringing in outsiders over a certain amount, and keeping your rewarded longtime veterans, in that pecking order, not bringing in someone from the outside, and all of a sudden this guy's the second highest paid player on the team, and has never played it down in Pittsburgh, kind of thing. So I think there'll be some kind of philosophies, long-standing philosophies, roster construction philosophies that don't change with this team. Who knows about the whole undrafted thing, right? That's something you and I have talked. Something you and I have talked about for numerous years now. Maybe you can start attracting guarantee half their salary or something like their rookie salary. Start getting competitive for some of these undrafted college free agents, and at least give yourself a little bit better crop of kids, to pull from that way. And who knows, maybe that will be. But I think overall, the general philosophy is still going to be built through the draft, supplement through free agency moderately, and maybe they'll get a little bit more aggressive in that area.
Sure. I think all that's true. I don't think you're going to see any drastic changes, but the little things I think you're going to see. The things you mentioned, I think you talked about this last week. Well, they look at the small school kids more often, right? The FCS pool. They very rarely do that. When they do, it's pretty obvious. That's possible. What about trading down in the first round? Something Kevin Colbert only did once his entire tenure, back in 2001, and moved down 3 spots and still got Casey Hampton. Colbert, I think, had a very antiquated view of trading down, where you would only trade down as many spots as guys that he liked and be willing to take. So if he moved down 5 spots, there had to be 5 guys that he really wanted to take. And I get that as a safety security thing, but I think there's a lot of value in teams who trade down and collect more picks. And the more picks you have, the more chances you have that. I don't know if any of these things are going to happen, but the things that we're going to have to look at and evaluate and consider. And we can't necessarily say that the old, Blues Clues or Colbert rules, do they still exist? Maybe, but we can't, they're not as ironclad as they were, because obviously Colbert's not in charge anymore.
Yeah, I think we're going to both kind of be working under the assumption that most of them are, at least.
Sure, but assumptions,
you're right.
You know what they do.
Right, at least until we're proven wrong on a few of them. But I know it's been a running joke for us for a while, but I firmly believe it. I think you got to get more away from that 25 names on the card, and you can't put yourself in a position. And I'm just using this as an example here. So don't send me any hate mail. I like the kid. Who knows what he might develop at, but the whole trading up, for a louder milk, thing like that. I understand, and we had a great discussion about the, how high, the body type and all, and the lack of that being in that year's draft. But was there really that big of a need to trade up for that kid? For a height, weight, speed guy, for a guy that, for all, might he have lasted till they're picking that round anyway. Sometimes I think just Kevin Colbert builds that list of 25 names, and come hell or high water, he's going to get them, and he doesn't leave himself too many options, and thus either maybe he reaches a little bit, or maybe You see where I'm going with that? He just, he needs to open up his board a little bit more, I think, and maybe potentially have a few more names on that thing.
Yeah, I think again you're going to see a little less of that rigidity and the old school nature, because Kevin Colbert was as old school is, and that's in most ways are very good things, but in some ways, there's probably some hindrances and things that you're overlooking across along the way, and things that can be improved. And Kevin Colbert talked about fresh ideas, and I think Khan and certainly Andy Weidl is going to be able to bring some of that. So we'll see. I'll just say it's a long time coming for Omar Khan. I was doing some research earlier today, actually, of all the GM interviews that he's had. Pittsburgh was his 9th GM interview that he's had. They started back in 2010. Almost got the job in 2010. It came down to him and John Schneider, who's still there in Seattle. Rams in 2012, Dolphins 2013, Jets 2013, Dolphins again 2014. I might be actually a little off on that, but Texans 2021, Panthers 2021, Bears earlier this year, and now Pittsburgh in 2022. So took 9 times, but 9 times is the charm, I guess.
Yeah, and look, the reason we haven't really talked about him so as much is it just kind of had felt like, Omar kind of become the stale guy. he's a cap guy, his name, he never could get that outside job, and it made you start kind of wondering what's wrong with him.
Right. Well, he got so close. Again, remember the Texans job last year? He was supposed to be the guy. He should be the Texans GM right now.
But he didn't get it.
Right. He didn't get it. But I'm just to illustrate the point of how close this guy's been. Reportedly, like they were negotiating a contract, and then it was, who was it? Easterby that came in and handpicked Cesario, basically. So, I mean, this guy's been so close before, and he finally got the opportunity.
And look, he knows the organization. They know him. Tomlin knows him. And at least they went through the process. It seemed to be, at least from the outside, looked to be a thorough process. Heck, it had me guessing on it. I didn't know which way to handicap this thing, to be quite honest with you. I started to believe the writing was on the wall that it was going to be, potentially Weidl there. Mm-hmm. So it did start to seem like that it wasn't going to be Hunt, for whatever that's worth. So anyway, that's where we stand on this. I mean, I think one complements the other good there with Weidl, and put some fresh blood in the organization at this, while promoting from internally as well too. So I think it's a nice little mix of both. You get some fresh ideas from the outside to mix in with your old ideas as well too there. So I mean, well, obviously the proof will be in the pudding. I mean, you got to put trophies in the case, right?
Right. And Weidl, the first assistant GM in Steelers history, so a little bit of notoriety there.
We saw Khan at a couple of the pro days as well too this past go around, and so obviously he had a little bit of a hand in this draft class. So probably was on board with quite a bit of it there. So I don't think you have to worry about him running Kenny Pickett out of town. Or anything like that, obviously. And, Pickens, I mean, look, the first 3 or 4 picks are all you're really worried about anyway. Those are the ones that you kind of hope you hit on 2 or 3 of those anyway there. So at least he was involved in the process. And once again, I don't think you'll see a situation where, those are Kevin Colbert's draft class. Let's rid ourselves of that group.
And he was pretty heavily involved in terms of the quarterback pro days as well. Here are the pro days we spotted Omar Khan at this year. Pitt, of course, and Pickett ended up being the guy. Ole Miss, Cincinnati, and LSU. So that's, Ole Miss, Cincinnati, and Pitt with the quarterbacks. And so I'm sure Khan had some involvement in the process. He was obviously around it. And so, again, I talk about him having a bit of that football background as well, although his title and his job description's been in the business, the salary cap side of things. There is some of that football side of it as well. I think, Pittsburgh was very thorough in the search, and that's a good and smart thing to do. There was not as much of an urgency to hire a guy because you were the last team to do it. You were waiting till after the draft so you could go through 16 names before the draft and then whittle that list down to 6. I do have to laugh just as a jokey, tongue-in-cheek way. Pittsburgh had an incredibly thorough search for their quarterback, and they picked the guy next door, and they had an incredibly thorough search for their GM, and they picked the guy that was sitting in their room. So it's a lot of work, and it's a smart process to go about it, but all roads, I guess, lead back to Pittsburgh.
Hey, and look, this is the first time Art Rooney II had to do this, as well, and hopefully he doesn't have to do it for another several years and all. I mean, Omar's still fairly young in the grand scheme of things, I think. So, look,
he's in his 40s, I think. Still, he's super young.
Yeah. So once again, look, is it the right move here? Well, proof's going to be in the pudding, right? We'll have to see moving forward on here, and he'll still be somewhat linked to the to this draft class, being as he was here as well too. And I'm looking forward to the press conferences whenever those things go down.
Right. Hopefully they're going to be happening sooner than later. I do want to mention this piece of totally, unimportant history because I wrote an article about it, which I think is now going to be scrapped because it was all based on before a hire happened. The other candidates, Pittsburgh, the other finalists to be the GM back in 2000 when they picked Colbert was Jerry Angelo and Terry Bradway. And so they made the right decision there, obviously, with Colbert. Those guys became GMs, Bradway and Angelo, but obviously no one had the success that Kevin Colbert did. But anyway, to the bigger point, Colin, smart guy, knows his team as well as anybody. You do think Brandon Hunt's going to be leaving at some point within 10 months, probably sooner than that. I think hopefully gone by the start of the training camp, basically. But I think they're going to add some scouts. So you mentioned Casey Weidl, Mark Sadowski, a cap guy. One or two other changes could happen in terms of the scouting aspect of it. And so overall, it's a season of change for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, and once again, I think the things to kind of watch there are the things that we highlighted during this show. Weidl's brother, Sadowski are a couple names to watch, and then we'll see what happens down below in the rest of the scouting department because we Blues Clues those guys. They almost feel like family. You know them on site now. Most of these guys on site now at this point. We're probably going to be a little bit of turnover there, and it's going to be interesting to see if guys like Omar, when he does hold a press conference, if he's asked about things like that. What's going to happen with the scouting department? What things will he bring? Does he expect to do a little bit different? Will he be asked about analytics and those kind of things there? So, I mean, I know I could come up with a good 10 questions right off the bat to ask him. You could probably come up with another 10 as well, too. So hopefully about one of those gets asked.
Right. And frankly, he's the guy that most fans, even Steeler fans, don't know a lot about. I mean, they know that he's the cap guy, but he's not a very visible part of the organization. And so it'll be a good opportunity for fans to get to know who this guy is. I think people will be impressed overall by whenever this press conference is introducing him. And then obviously the results are going to be the most and only important thing. But I think people will like what Khan has to say whenever he talks to the media.
All right. If we gave the people about 30 minutes here or what? A little bit longer than 30 minutes or what?
Yeah, looks like it. I don't know if you want to get in any of the OTA stuff as well, or just save all that for Friday. There is some news that came out of Steelers' first day of OTAs today as well.
Yeah, why don't we recap some of that now?
Yeah, just because there'll be other stuff that comes out, I'm sure, Wednesday, Thursday. So we'll hit on some of just the couple key points today. Probably the biggest piece of news, two pieces of news that came out today. Stephon Tuitt not attending the first day of OTAs, but Cam Hayward, Tyson Alualu, I believe others are very strongly hinting that Tuitt will rejoin the team at some point. When that is, no one has said, but they're basically saying don't be alarmed by Tuitt's absence to begin these voluntary OTAs.
All right. And I tell you, Cameron Hayward sure made it convincing, didn't he? Of course, but this is the same Cameron Hayward that thought throughout last season that Stephon Tuitt would be back. Right. I mean, I don't know how much faith to put in it, but you read the quotes and all from Cameron Hayward. He sure is convinced that we're going to see Tuitt at some point here. So I don't know what to do with all of it, to be honest with you, because look, the big news this week would have been Stephon Tuitt showing up. Well, the big news this week is Stephon Tuitt not showing up. There. So obviously, had he showed up, you have a little bit more finality to it, right? Whereas this end of it, and coupled with what Cameron Hayward says, you still kind of have questions of whether or not how this thing's going to play out. Sure.
No, I think you're right about that. So we'll see. I hope that Hayward is right. I want to believe him, but as you said, he said that Tuitt would play last year, and that obviously did not happen. So I don't know when that could be. I don't know if that means he might show up tomorrow or next week or during the mandatory minicamp.
It doesn't sound like he's going to be around in OTAs. So to me, the next line in the sand seems to be mandatory minicamp.
Yeah, and again, I respect whatever decision Tuitt wants to make, but I don't understand if you were planning on playing why you would not be there at OTAs to kind of really get your new season started. Even if you weren't practicing much or at all, just to be around the team and have that confirmation. I think it's a good and valuable thing after missing all of last year, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, personally, we get it. It's voluntary, blah, blah, blah. I think the whole organization, I think the fan base for the most part, been very supportive of Tuitt and everything. But I was kind of expecting if Tuitt's going to play this year that he would have showed up at this for whatever that's worth there. Now, I mean, if you get the mandatory and he's not there,
right?
I mean, I don't know how a guy like Hayward even can calm the fears in that. To be honest with you,
right? If he does not show up to mandatory minicamp, then you can't expect this guy to play. So and so if he is planning on playing this year or attempting to play, he'll be there at least for the mandatory minicamp. What is that? or first week of June, second
It's
week of
like
June.
the 7th, isn't it? In like June 7th or something.
Yeah, I think
when
it's
that
right around there.
starts
So
and all. And I mean that's not too far off,
no,
to,
2
to
weeks.
be honest with you here. So we'll to be continued on that. Heck, we've waited this long to speculate about all that. So what's another couple of weeks when it comes to that?
True. Don't need speculation for what's going to happen, at least to start, with Kendrick Green reportedly playing guard to begin OTAs. Now, again, these things are fluid and guys can move around, et cetera, et cetera. But Kendrick Green getting some work at guard after being last year's starting center and struggling mightily.
Absolutely, and that is the absolute right decision they are making with him. In my opinion, I think you had, I think really pretty much we had groups speculated that this thing would probably be left to right. It would be Dan Moore Jr., Kevin Dotson, Mason Cole, James Daniels, and Chikwama Okorafor, and that sounds like exactly what it was. It sounds like Kendrick Green getting some mixed in work there over at the left guard position. That's the right way to handle him, I think. And some people say, well, doesn't he deserve to at least lose the center job? Well, he really already did that. To me, now he's in the category of he has to win a job at one of these positions moving forward. Now, is my thoughts on him. It's going to take a lot from me to get away from. That's a pick that the Steelers should have stayed away from there. Overall, just the whole, they trusted somebody too much. Whoever it was, Clem or whatever. They too much trust in that situation there. A guy that barely played center at the college level. A guy that was undersized as it was at the left guard position, a guy that could not stay on his feet even in college. You had a lot of questions about him, even at guard coming out of college, I think there. And then try to make us, we saw how that went. It didn't go well at all. So I have no issue with the way they're starting things out. Now, obviously, Mike Thomas says, it is what it is right now. It doesn't mean nothing, but I think it does mean a little something. They want to take a good look at those 5 to start things off. And I would say, barring injury or somebody, not performing well, that's what they intend on being their starting 5 as we sit here right now.
And they paid Cole a decent amount of money as well. And so you kind of figured that was going to be starting. And he signed the first day of free agency. So it's hard to see a guy that got a decent amount of money, about $5 million per year, sign on the first day of free agency to just be a backup. And so, again, we'll see what happens. I certainly think Pittsburgh miscalculated Green's readiness. They thought he was a day one ready guy. They basically said as much, and he was the farthest thing from that. He's a guy that was raw and needed some time, underclassmen. He would not play at a lot of center kind of spot work there at Illinois. I think it's smart, and I think the best thing for Green at this point is to try to become that versatile interior swingman, kind of the BJ Finney role, where you can be the top backup at both guard spots and, of course, at center. But I just wonder, him at guard, the same issues he had at center, he's going to have at guard unless he really cleans up his technique. In some ways at guard, you're going to be isolated more often. You're not going to be always, chipping and finding work. You're going to be covered up more than being uncovered at center. And frankly, my terrible take on this for Wednesday is, when is the last time a Steelers guard who was small worked? You've seen some smaller centers and they work, Mike Webster, but you think about the guards, you think about Foster, DeCastro, Faneca, even Chris Kamiatu. Those were big guys. You've seen guys like Haas and Auer struggle at guard. He's better at center. Same with Stefan Wisniewski, who got brief time at guard and really struggled. Kendrick Green being a 6'2", 300-pound guard without a lot of length, I think it's going to cause a lot of problems as well.
Look, Kamiatu was even bigger than him. Wasn't Chris Kamiatu like 6'2"? Wasn't he like 6'2" and what was it, 3/4? You got that on you?
I can try to see if Wikipedia has it. They don't seem to. Listed Wikipedia listing is maybe not the combine time, but 6'3", 344. I don't know the length. I mean, he wasn't.
I see 6'03" and a half, 6'03.4 at the combine.
You have an arm length on that?
No, I do not.
Let me see if Draft Scout has it here for him.
He did have shorter arms, if memory serves me.
Yeah. But he was obviously 344, much bigger, stronger.
Right.
I mean, and Green is a strong guy. He's built well, but again, you just look at the overall lack of size going up against some of these guys. And again, Kimiati was not a great guard, but he was a decent run blocker and
Well,
very good in pass
here's the
pro.
thing. Look at the times it changed too. Back then, you run the power, and you're pulling Kimoato 7 times a game, right?
True.
On the move, you're running a lot more. As opposed, and obviously he wasn't an awesome pass blocker, but he was serviceable to a degree. The thing with him is he took a lot of penalties, false starts and holds and stuff like that. But I mean, he was a lot more serviceable, and even he was undersized at 6. I mean, let's not beat around the bush. 6'3" and a half is still undersized by today's standards. Now he was a bowling ball, and the thing is about him is he could get on the hoof. He wasn't changing directions once he got on the move, right? Overall, but
my point is a guy that wasn't.
It's going to take a lot for me to not consider Kendrick Green a miss, a colossal miss.
Yeah, my point is, Kimiati was not a super talented player, had some size, and that suited him well. And again, I know that schemes have changed and eras have changed and things like that, but tell me the last time a small guard in Pittsburgh worked that wasn't the 1970s. I can't think of a name.
And Kimiati was also a 6th round draft pick, if memory serves me. So
right, he was, and so that's some context there as well. So we'll see, but I think again he has to become the swingman, become versatile. If he's a backup, and presuming that he'll be a backup, then you have to be versatile. You can't just be a backup at one spot, and he'll have to learn right guard as well. Obviously, get reps again at left guard at the NFL level. So can he salvage his career? Sure. Again, I think Pittsburgh really did him a disservice last year, but I don't see him as his team's starting center. I don't see him as a starter, period, barring an injury.
All right, what else we got from we got our starting 5. We got a quarterback rotation of Trubisky, Rudolph, Pickett, and Oladokin, I believe. Mike Tomlin will tell you not to read too much into that, but it is what it is. To kind of start with, sounds like reps were kind of evenly divided in that first day there. What else kind of maybe stuck out as far as what rolled in today?
That was the big thing, just the quarterbacks talking. Mason Rudolph said the reps were split pretty evenly. I don't know the exact rotation, nor do I care about it too much on the first day of OTAs. It sounds like it went Trubisky first team, Rudolph second team, Pickett third team. Was that kind of your feel of it as well?
That's what at least the tape shows.
Okay, I didn't realize that there were some videos that showed that, but so that's kind of where it seemed to be day one, but it is day one, and so Pickett being third string as the rookie is no surprise, and these things can change, and guys will rotate and stuff like that. So again, how do you get all these guys reps? I think the reps have to be focused around Trubisky and Pickett. You know Rudolph very well. You know his game. This is his 5th year with a team. You don't know Trubisky. You don't know Pickett in a Steelers helmet in that environment, in that practice setting. You got to know and got to learn as much about these guys as possible to really get the best evaluation and make the best decision.
All right, and we're not allowed to say that he wasn't there because the media is not allowed to, but all signs point to Deontay Johnson was not there. So make of that what you will. Disappointing to some degree, I suppose. My terrible take was about that topic on Tuesday here. Would you like him there? Absolutely, you would. I mean, you got you're young on both sides of the football. You got new quarterbacks that you're dealing with there. Hell yeah, you'd like to have Deontay Johnson there. Is it the end? We'll see what happens. Maybe I know there's the whole thing with his camp and a flight delayed on that and caused a lot of angry parents and all like that. I mean, the optics of that obviously isn't great, but things happen, Yeah,
the guy missed a flight. I don't even know why it's a story.
I think it was weather or something like that. Had him held up. Now, does that mean the weather held him up and he's still coming to town? He's going to be there on Wednesday. We'll see.
I would doubt it. I would very much doubt it.
Okay. Well, if he's not and he's not there for the remaining 5 practices in total. It's not the end of the world. Come get me when the mandatory stuff starts. As long as he's look, this is let's not beat around the bush. It's probably contract related, right?
Yes, it's 100%. contractual. Yeah, I don't expect Johnson to be around for OTAs until mandatory minicamp because he does not want to get fined for missing those. But the way that the other receivers, Debo Samuel, for example, in San Francisco is not at OTAs, I don't think Johnson's going to be there.
Yeah, it's just a statement. I think saying, hey, I'm not happy right now, and I'm showing you by not showing up to the mandatory or to the voluntary stuff right now because I don't have to, and I'm not going to put my body at risk and get my feet tangled up with an undrafted whoever, however you want to frame it. That's what his beliefs are going to be. So yeah, I'm with you. I would be surprised if he shows up for the rest of these 5 OTA practices. Mandatory minicamp obviously is another thing there because it is mandatory. You would expect him to be present for that. He's got, he's not going to hold out, I don't think, during camp or anything like that. He can't. You get fined for that. Now those fines are not forgivable, whereas they used to be. I think those fines stick now. Those per day fines stick. According to the CBA and all like that now as well too. So this is just Deontay kind of making a little bit of a statement here. We'll keep our fingers crossed. Maybe he does show up for a practice or for an OTA practice or two, but I wouldn't hold my breath in the same instance. Now, I don't know if anybody else that was not there. Maybe there was another player or two. I think Minka was there. I think I saw pictures of him. I obviously saw Cam, Watt, Highsmith.
Was Boswell there?
I don't know.
Guy looking for a contract.
Yeah, I don't know if he was there or not.
Okay, that's the only other guy I could think of. Minka being there is one of those contract situations where he'll get paid, but you wouldn't have batted too much of an eye if he was not there. But him being there might be that sign of good faith. I know Watt seemed to be working in some capacity as well.
All right,
Derek or TJ Watt, and I mentioned that just because maybe they would have taken him a bit easier. I don't know exactly how much teamwork he was getting and stuff like that, but I just wondered how they would handle a guy like precious cargo like TJ Watt during OTAs.
I think their presence is their present, if you will. You know what I'm saying? And I think in so many words, Mike Tomlin kind of addressed that today. Just the fact that they're around and the other guys can see them around and see how they do what work that they do work and how they carry themselves and culture and interaction with teammates and yada yada. So for all I'm concerned, TJ Watt could go do 2 drills, 1 rep each, and wear a floppy hat the rest of the time there. That guy knows how to keep himself ready, and as long as he's around and with the other teammates and answering questions and those kind of things, that his presence is his presence.
Mm-hmm. Well said there. So we'll keep you posted. We'll come back Friday and see what else there is to say or note. Probably not as much as there was today, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I thought all the quarterbacks handled themselves, Mason and Trubisky during the Q&A in the locker room. I thought that went fine. I think some of these other quotes will probably trickle out over time. Boy, how great was it? Tyson Alualu back and medically cleared, as Mike Tomlin said, from his injury from last season. So that's got to be a boom to have the old man around there as well too there. So we'll see what happens these next 2 days of OTA practices, and you and I will be back on Friday to kind of wrap it all up in a ball, right?
Yep, sounds good, Dave. We'll talk to you guys then.
You can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast, and I'll just cut it off right there. We'll be back on Friday. As always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.